What I found is I applied for lots and lots of jobs, like literally 50, 60 jobs. All of them never replied apart from one. And I got this one letter, which I still have in a folder, which the HR director said, I don't know why you applied for this job. You're a teacher. You should stay being a teacher. And what I learned from that, apart from being really frustrated and managing my own emotions, was human beings like to label each other. And he'd labeled, all these HR directors had labeled me as a teacher, and they couldn't look beyond the teacher to see the skills the teacher had. So the next CV, or the next job that I applied for, I didn't write teacher on my CV. I wrote expert communicator, able to entertain and inform audiences for 8 hours a day. And do you know what? People were interested suddenly, right? I was flexing how I talked about things, right? That's the key part. It's that people want to hear something different from you. And I ended up working for an energy company, and I learned all about the oil and gas market, all about energy sectors.
Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. If you're new, I'm Nicole and I'm your host. And this is your go-to self-development podcast where we envision living our best lives, ones filled with unlimited possibilities, by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. And if you are returning, a very warm welcome back, EnvisionAir. I'm so happy that you've chosen to come back today and to learn, listen, and grow with me today. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
Today, we're going to be speaking about how you can unlock your potential for success, and we're joined by Faris Aranki, the CEO of Shiageto Consulting, an innovative consulting firm that blends strategy with emotional intelligence. We're going to be discussing the very unique equation that he has created for ultimate success, which he shares with his clients that include some of the biggest brands in the world, including Coca-Cola, Amazon, Tesco, Lloyd's, EY, and many, many more. Over 20 years, he has come to realize that what often hinders institutions from achieving their goals isn't the quality of their ideas, but it's their ability to engage effectively with others at all levels and remove barriers in their way, an area that he excels in. Not only does he lead Shiageto, Faris is now an accomplished speaker, writer, and contributor for various outlets. So I'm very, very pleased that he is on the EnvisionAir podcast to talk to us about this really interesting topic. So a very warm welcome, Faris. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Nicole, thank you, and the EnvisionAirers for having me today.
Yes. Well, we're really pleased you could be here. So thank you. So let's dive into this, because I when I learned about this formula, I thought it was so fascinating, and I read up about it on your website. And so the formula that you use for success is IQ times EQ times FQ. So let's start with it and tell us all about it, how it came about, and how you use it to help your clients succeed.
Well, I was just looking for a way to put lots of cues together, to be honest. Nicole, no, I am a Bond fan, but that isn't the genesis. It's not the cue. I was trying to codify. I was trying to work out from a 20-year career working in strategy, what was the difference in the companies that I'd worked in that were successful and those that weren't. And I'd been a strategy consultant, Nicole, before I started my own business 5 years ago. And so it was very evident that strategy was a key part of it. And I for strategy, I call that IQ. How good is your idea? How good is your strategy? And that was really clear. You need a great idea to start. Okay. And, but that's not enough. There are loads of people out there who've had great ideas and have not gone on to achieve success. And then it became very clear that there was a second component. I saw the difference in many companies that I worked with and many individuals was their level of emotional intelligence. And this is the EQ part, right? How great they are at getting on with others, at sort of engaging them, responding to their emotions and their responses. So these really were, and you probably look across your own collection of friends and people you've met, and you can spot these people who can just light up a room, understand people. So having that emotional intelligence is important. So great idea, emotional intelligence. But do you know what? When I sort of began to sift through, there were still people who had both of those things, or companies that had those things that were missing, that still weren't successful. And that's when I cottoned onto this missing component, kind of like the third leg of a tripod, which was the focus quotient, right? And I say it as though that phrase has been around a long time. It didn't exist. It was the companies that were super focused on their great idea, right, while taking others on the journey, were the ones that were successful. And I researched this focus quotient and was surprised there wasn't anything around it in the literature. There was a lot around focus, but there was no. And so I sort of captured that and trademarked it and put it all together for an equation. And it was quite crucial for me that you needed all three of these, and you couldn't just rely on 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3. So that's how the magic formula came up. It was really looking back at my career, looking back at my friends and people around me who were successful, and really trying to simplify it into 3 components.
Fascinating. Okay, so if I was going to summarize, it seems like IQ is all about the actual ideas, the good ideas that people come up with. And then the EQ is like that emotional intelligence, which may manifest in how you can sell the ideas, but also how you build relationships and how you maybe even get like all layers of a business on board with these ideas.
Yeah.
And then FQ is a little bit more to focus it and bring everyone sort of along, or like maybe even bring in the IQ and the EQ all together. Is that right?
Yeah, it's that discipline. It's that sort of thinking through, hey, I want to get from A to B. What is going to get in my way? Let's clear those hurdles before we even encounter them, right? That's what you. And, a great example is 2 weeks ago, I met this amazing young lady who is aiming to be the first human being, or the youngest human being, I should say, to climb all 14 highest mountains in the world.
Wow.
Okay, she's 23 years old. She's going to attempt it in a month. And when I spoke to her, she climbed her first highest mountain at the age of 15.
Wow.
Okay. And when she did that, she said, this is going to be my focus. And so she dropped out of high school, right? She gave up her social life, all the other things you'd expect from 15, 16, 17 and just dedicated 8 years of her life to doing that, right? So she had an idea. She got a support team, her family invested, and that's the EQ part. She told everyone about it. But then she was like, I need to remove distractions, even the distraction of school, right? She doesn't drink alcohol. She doesn't do any of that. She removed all those distractions. That is the FQ that is, bring it to life, that you need. Not necessarily we all need to give up alcohol, but you need that focus to say, this is important to me. Therefore, what is going to get in my way? Let's just deal with that now.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the example that you gave of, thank you for sharing that. I hope that this young woman, obviously meets her goals. It seems like she is, because she's very determined and focused, like you said. So does that mean that one needs to like fully just focus like entirely? I mean, this woman that you said, 8 years she committed of her life. Is that level of focus necessary? Or and I guess if I was looking at it from like a 3-pronged perspective, what would you say it's like 30%, 30%, or 33%, 33%, 33%? I know you're a math teacher, you had that background. So I don't want to, and you have a master's in math. So like I'm really, and math is never my strength. But anyway, so whatever the apportionments are equally, yes. Yeah. Would it have to be like 30% is like a great idea, 30% emotional intelligence, and 30% focus? Or from what you've said, is it focus is actually the most important? It could even be like 60%.
I've never gone to sort of break it down. It'll be different. Here's the thing, like classic example. It'll be different depending on the individual and the situation. Okay. Yeah. And even the timing, right? What I mean by that is obviously at the start of any journey, it's probably an index on IQ. What am I going to do? How I want to get from A to B. What are all my options to get from A to B? Let's go through all those. Let's research some more. Let's come up with great ideas. So you're probably over-indexing. Probably 80% of your efforts is in the IQ, right? But then once you get that great idea, you're fairly certain about the great idea. That's it, right? I've done that hard work. Okay. Particularly if I've come up with 100 options for for how to get to A to B. If option 1, 2, and 3 fail, I still got 97. So it's not like I have to repeat this thinking. It's not like I need to gather all the minds. So really at the start, it's usually a lot of IQ. Okay. But IQ, and here's the thing, they are interlinked, right? A lot of IQ, we rob ourselves of IQ because of lack of EQ, right? We dislike an idea because it creates an emotion in us, but it might be a really good idea. So actually, a lot of people unconsciously think idea generation is devoid of emotion, but it's not. It's not. And I can give some examples of where that is, and it's a hidden bias. But in the start, lots of IQ. Then once you've got your great idea, you need to get everyone else excited by it, right? I want to climb that mountain, right? You're not going to do it at the age of 15 unless your mum and dad are supportive, right? Unless your school teachers are supportive, right? So then it switches to your focus on that EQ. Okay, this is the point in this success. I need to tell everyone about it. I need to tell them passionately. I need to, when they say, "Oh, I'm not sure you should do that," I should respond to their perspectives and make sure they're on board and I've listened to them. Right. But once you've got them on board, and that's an ongoing game because new people are going to enter your world, right? People are going to change their opinion over time. So again, a lot of people think, "Oh, I just have to do the EQ bit once and everyone's on board." No, think about teams, how dynamic they are. So you're always going to have to keep the EQ engine running, so to speak. There is a big period of EQ focus.
Yeah.
But then the hard yards is the FQ, staying disciplined. Right? Because in 8 years, a lot can happen. You can get distracted by your friends going, "Come on, come out for a beer. Come on, this," right? That's where the FQ, and it's not just about discipline, but a lot of the FQ is up front, right? Make those decisions. It's linked back to the IQ. This is what I want to achieve, right? I am pre-deciding all these things so that I don't have to on a Friday night when a friend rings me and says, "Come on, let's go and do this." You say, "Do you know what? I set a rule 3 years ago." Right? It's easier for you to say, "No, that's my focus. I've already set my rules."
Yeah.
So there is a lot of IQ at the front. Then it's a combination of EQ and FQ there on in until you achieve your goal.
Yeah.
Right? You might have to iterate and go back to IQ and rethink your ideas, but it's that kind of if that kind of makes sense.
100%. And I love how you set that out so nicely. And we're going to deep dive into each of these. But before we do, I'd love to know your story of how I know you have a very colorful background. You've pivoted at different points in your life. And I love that because I've had a similar journey. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast. So tell me a little bit about, where you started, how you got to where you are, and obviously also the beginning of your consulting firm.
Yeah, I'll weave it. And do you know what? The penny dropped for me a while back that actually my own history has elements of IQ, EQ, and FQ. And I'll sort of as a child, I was very drawn to the sciences and the maths. So lots of IQ. Everything was all about logic and rationale, and that's what I studied. I did maths and economics, and actually the first time I did economics was when I got to university and I did a double degree. And I thought economics was a science like maths, but I realized, and I thought it had one answer. But I realized as soon as I started getting into lectures, economics is a social science. It's about debate. It's where a lot of EQ comes in, right?
Right.
So I entered a lot of those conversations and a lot of that study with a very IQ mindset. And I realized it's not about having a perfect answer. It's about convincing others and arguing and rash. And that's where EQ comes in, because you can't land ideas unless you listen to other people's opinions and adapt. Right. So really, I went from being a very IQ focused person to balancing IQ and EQ. And what that meant for my career is my first career was as a school teacher. I taught high school, or secondary school as we call it here in the UK. And I spent 5.5 years teaching high school math and economics. Right.
Wow.
Absolutely loved it. It was an experience, if I'm honest, that allowed me to travel the world, because I taught in different countries, in different high schools, different institutions. Absolutely loved it. Right. Great thing. And then I came back to the UK, was teaching in the UK, and I decided it wasn't for me. I was in a school that was very challenging, and again, it was that FQ. It wasn't my focus. It wasn't the thing I was willing to sacrifice other things to do. It had merely been something to travel with and see the world and explore. And so once that was firm in my head, it was, do you know what? I've always wanted to go into the business world. So I transitioned into the business world, which was, I made it sound really easy. That alone was a journey. And again, it was a journey of a lot of EQ, because what I found is I applied for lots and lots of jobs, like literally 50, 60 jobs. All of them never replied apart from one. And I got this one letter, which I still have in a folder, which the HR director said, I don't know why you applied for this job. You're a teacher. You should stay being a teacher. And what I learned from that, apart from being really frustrated and managing my own emotions, was human beings like to label each other. And he'd labeled all these HR directors had labeled me as a teacher, and they couldn't look beyond the teacher to see the skills a teacher had. So the next CV or the next job that I applied for, I didn't write teacher on my CV. I wrote expert communicator, able to entertain and inform audiences for 8 hours a day. Right? And do you know what? People were interested suddenly, right? I was flexing how I talked about things, right? That's the key part. It's that people want to hear something different from you. And I ended up working for an energy company, and I learned all about the oil and gas market, all about energy sectors. And I ended up in their strategy team, and I realized I loved solving complex problems, right? So I spent 4 years in that energy company, and then I got approach to join strategy consulting, which is just being a big brain, solving things for people. And I spent 12 years doing that. I went from being an analyst to being a partner in a firm, and really enjoyed it. But it was just far too IQ dominated. It was, here you go, here's your perfect answer. And then 9 times out of 10, people would not, the companies would do nothing with it. They wouldn't achieve what we'd set out in the strategy. And that's when I began to realize that it was lacking the EQ and the FQ. And that's, the penny dropped that actually there was a business there, because I had the ability, thanks to my teaching, to really vary stuff and emotionally, get through the emotional challenges of people, that actually there was a business, if we could offer that service alongside the strategy, would be far more powerful than just developing the strategy. So that was the genesis of my business, and it's taken me from high school teacher to working for corporate to working as a consultant to now running and building a business from scratch.
But see, what I'm curious about is that moment where you start having those moments. I'm sure that you start having that realization that this is a heavily, let's say, IQ focused business, which definitely has its, purpose, but it didn't really align with your values. So, because I know that there are listeners where this is happening. And so the question is, oftentimes, I think a lot of people start questioning, like, am I in the wrong career? Is it the wrong company? Whereas I'm curious to know why you decided in that moment, or maybe again, I would be curious just to know how you got to the point where you said, actually, there is a business here. Did you have like brainstorming sessions? Were you talking to a lot of people? Like, how did you come to that realization that you were going to start your own business?
As with many things in life, I'd love to say it was a eureka moment, but I am just as susceptible to biases, my own biases, as any of the clients that I work with.
Yeah.
There's an old saying, which is jam or peanut butter can't read its own label.
Okay, right? I've never heard of that.
Right? I often say hummus because I'm from the Middle East and I like to name it. What it means is, if you're in the inside of a jar, you can't see the label on the outside, right? It's like, for those of you watching, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes someone who's just standing external to say, you do realize it says this on your label, or you do realize there's this. So what that means, translated, what does that mean for me? I started working with a coach, a career coach, which ironically was given to me by my old employer to help me get higher up in their organization. Right. But she really helped me realize that I wasn't enjoying the job, that I wasn't using my full skill set. And then she challenged me to, how could you use your full skill set? And that's when I started to think of this idea of starting my own business. Well, initially I thought of the idea of what I would do. And then she challenged me again, well, why not build it if you're so clear, instead of looking for somebody else to build it on your behalf?
Right.
So really powerful process. And that's why I advocate, talk to someone external. You can't be your own thought partner on everything.
100%. And then were you confident in terms of starting your own business? Because that is also another huge challenge on itself. If you don't have, let's say, that entrepreneurial background. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got into the right mindset? Because it's a big leap of faith.
It's a massive leap of faith, right? And very few of us actually know whether if it's your first time, whether you're going to be successful or not, right? So I didn't have a clue. I'd never started a business. I never even thought about it. So initially I said to myself, this is this sort of FQ. You're going to do it for 2 years. It's going to be your focus. You're not going to do anything else. That's it. Then you can, even if it fails, you can say, I did it. I gave it a go. But you're going to go at it full pelt. So that was the mental commitment I made to myself. Okay. And so I just immersed myself. Right. I was like, let's go for it. Right. And then but I did that in a way that I looked at, and this was thanks to the help with the coach. I looked across the stuff I enjoyed doing, and I said, let's bake that into the business. So it wasn't, I was fighting every sinew in my body of, oh, I've got to do this, even though I hate it. It was, hey, I've really picked the stuff I love. Right. So what do I mean by that is business development is a big part of running your own business. Right. As I tell every small business owner, nobody gives a damn you're out there. Right. They've never heard of you. They're not going to be Googling you. And unless you go and knock on their door, somehow get in their face, they're not going to do anything. Right. As much, even if they love you. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing how many friends still don't realize I run my own business. I'm like, oh, you're doing that. Oh, right. Right. Because, right. And that reinforces, I need to keep knocking. I need to keep telling people. Right. But if that's a chore, then you're going to be in struggle. So I already loved catching up with people. I already loved. So I just turned that into my way of promoting my business.
Yeah.
Let's just get out there and catch up with more people that I haven't spoken to in 5 years, 10 years. Right. Let's go infinite coffees because I love that. And I do it in my free time. So and that's what I'm talking about. So make a commitment to yourself, but try and then align it to your values, your personality.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
That's amazing.
But
That's incredible.
But join us after the commercial break. No, there is no commercial break. I'm leaving a cliffhanger because it didn't go to plan, Nicole. It did not.
I did not know.
Because COVID.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. I started 6 months before COVID. So even though I had this 2-year plan, I was chugging along nicely for 6 months. I picked up some clients. I still haven't really worked out, like the optimum way to do it. But I felt like I was getting tracked. Then COVID came and all 4 clients cancelled all their work contracts.
Oh, no.
2 of them went bankrupt, so we never even got paid, right? But even worse, I don't mind that not getting paid bit. I do mind it a little bit, but even worse was we then had 6 months of absolutely no work.
Yikes.
When you've geared yourself up to build something and then you have 6 months of nothing, that takes some, mental toughness, that takes some creativity. But I'm here 5 years later and the business is doing well.
Okay, so the cliffhanger though is like, how did you actually get through those 6 months? Because how did you survive?
Well, if your listeners send a check for $19.99. So here's what I discovered. So first thing I did was just accept it and process it. They deal with the emotion of, okay, this is shitty. If not, we'll blank it out. But everyone, this is a uncontrollable thing. Everyone is going through this. So it's not like someone is picking on you. It's not like because your business is bad. So make your peace with it. Deal with your own emotions. You can scream into a pillow. You can do whatever you like, right? Then it was about the IQ part was, right, we've had 6 months. Let's reflect on that. What has worked, what hasn't? And actually led to me actually writing 8 blogs, an 8-part blog series around what had worked, 4 is what hadn't worked. Right? And people still find those blogs and email me and say that was really useful, and I sort of dissected, as I am analytical. I went through, okay, we tried that. Did that work? No. What? So that was part of helping me process, because I was like, when this does open up, I want to be as lean and as prepared and as ready to, like a caged tiger, to leap out. So let's get all our thinking done. So it meant improving the website, improving the offerings, improving how we talked about things. So that was one part of it. The next part was about routine and focus, because, 6 months with no work, those are long days. So I would put a routine to my day where I'd work a bit on the business, this kind of reflection. I'd, do a couple of hours of exercise every day. And in the afternoons, I'd pick up a new hobby, right? I would just do something a bit tangential just to keep my brain going, right?
That's
and
amazing.
I do lots of reading. And I just did that every day and treated that like a job instead of just staying in bed till whatever, midday.
Yeah, right.
And sure, I'd take days off and stuff, but that kept me going for 6 months. And I kept reaching out to people as well. And it's amazing the conversations you had in that time. Of course, nobody was buying, and you had to stop. I stopped talking about selling. And actually, I discovered that was super powerful. And that's something I continued even beyond COVID, because if you haven't realized it yet, if you're too salesy, anyone listening, people switch off.
Yeah.
And the best conversations involve you not mentioning your business at all until later on.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. It sounds okay. So it sounds like you had a very good, even though initially you might have felt a little bit bad, you came to the acceptance, which is a great stage. I think a lot of people don't get to that point. Like, I think they just keep holding like the victim mindset. And it sounds really that is a big element of just accepting what it is. And then this idea of, it also sounds like you had a very positive mindset, because the assumption was that we are going to get out of it, which I think, again, I honestly, like during COVID, I had no idea. Like, it felt very like random. It was like 1 minute things are getting better, then things are getting worse. And I was all over the place. So it's really interesting that you had such a very, and I'm quite a positive person, but that's really interesting that you said, and I thought that was really, I picked up on that when you said, well, eventually we'll get out of it. So I want to make sure I'm as lean as ever. And I'm thinking, really? That's really good that you had that positive mindset. So being positive, obviously a very key part as well of the mindset. And then, like you said, kind of connecting with people, and rather than doing the sort of sales, it's more about the serving rather than sales, which is really great. So I like that in terms of mindset. So let's do a deep dive into each of the parts of the formula. So IQ, EQ, FQ. So IQ, if you're working with a client, how would you actually start presumably they come to you with ideas or some idea, a general idea.
Yeah.
But do you then tell us how one can actually start going through almost like a mini master class, if you will?
Yeah. And I'll use an example, right? And I'll bring it to life for people. So let's use the classic example, and I'll use myself, right? So the first thing I do with a client is spend some time saying, what do you want to achieve? Right. And we often don't spend enough time there. And let's just say my client is me, and I say, do you know what, Faris, I just want to be a better person. Right, that's my ambition. Or in the business context, when I work with companies, they're like, we just want to be more successful. I'm like, that's not good enough, buddy. What does that mean? How can we actually measure it? How can we tell, is it being a better person? Is it, having one more friend? Is it losing a bit of weight? Is it, speaking an extra language? Is it, and in the business world, is it making $1 more, $1 million more? You got to define it more. So we spend time there and asking why. Why do you want to achieve that? Right? What is it going to achieve? So often clients come to us and say, oh, we got this problem. And actually we unpick that problem for them and say, are you sure that's the problem? Right. And it's amazing. I'd say a third of the time it's not the problem at all. Right. Or it's not specifically defined enough. So instead of telling me I want to be a better person, going back to the example, go, do you know what, Faris, I want to lose weight. Right. I specifically want to lose this much weight. Right. Or I specifically want to learn this language. Okay. Now we have an objective. Now we can get going. So first part is shape the objective, shape the vision.
Yeah.
The next part is, okay, if that's what you want to do, together we're going to come up with 100 ways you could achieve it. Right? Now, most people only come up with one or two. And I'm also talking about companies. They'll go, oh, well, this is, we want to break into the Chinese market, right? We're going to do it this way. And I'm like, no, tell me 100 ways you're going to do it, right? Now, if I tell myself I want to lose weight, give me 100 ways you could lose weight. Right? And a lot of people think they don't have the creativity. A lot of people think, but a lot of it is just the narrative in our head, or we just go back to old ways of thinking. We're a bit lazy, right? So that's the first place where we help people. We help them come up with more ideas. Literally, I have techniques to get over 50 ideas out of a group of 10 people in under a minute.
Wow.
And I do regularly routines, and they're often astounded. They're like, I did not know we had all that creativity in the team, right? Because we've always looked at ourselves. So it's get ideas out, and then it's pick the best idea. Right. Based on fact and based on thing, right? Why should we pick this one over that one?
Yeah.
So that's the first part of IQ. And even better, final part of that is let's stress test it. Right. We do a lot of stress testing of ideas. So before you go all in and invest, £10,000 on a deluxe gym membership, let's stress test that idea to think of, where might this go wrong? Or, let's think of what ifs. So in the business sense, we do a lot of war gaming, a lot of pre-mortems around that. These are technical things to stress test your idea. But the outcome being that where you came in with, I kind of think I want to do this, and I kind of think I'm going to do it by this, you come out going, I am super clear. That's what I want to achieve. And this is the best option to get there.
Yeah, fascinating. What's wargaming? Because I saw that on what is that? Because I've never heard that term.
So war games came out of the military, and some people don't like that term, and I try not to use it as much as possible. But what it basically involves is, let's imagine you're a company and you say, do you know what? Our strategy is to be the cheapest in the market for this offering.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say it's Netflix. Say, okay, we're going to be the cheapest video streaming person. You say, great. But what happens if your competitors undercut you?
Okay.
Right. Let's play out your strategy, because you created your strategy in a vacuum, but the market is dynamic. People respond. When you do A, they'll do B. And you go, okay, well, if we start off at $5 a month, but then Disney come and do $4 a month, are you going to go to $3 a month? And what if they then go to 2? So you play out the game, and you say, and then they see, well, actually that will financially bankrupt us. Okay, so that your strategy isn't to be the cheapest. Right?
Wow.
So what do you do? Let's play a different scenario, right? So you play out scenarios, you throw stresses at their plan to find where the gaps are, or right, it might not be gaps, but to prepare them in case their competitors do the response, they've already pre-thought out their own response.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the worst thing is to make a decision under stress. Then you make a bad decision. But if you set out in a safe environment, you've already got a book of, hey, if they do this, then we do this. So that's what we do for clients. We play out the game, we find the gaps, we address them, and we give them a playbook so that they have much more confidence in their strategy or their idea.
And what if a listener is trying to do this on their own? So let's say it is a personal goal rather than a pure business goal. How would you suggest they stress test their ideas in terms of, because then all of a sudden, then sometimes people will just get in their own head. They'll be like, this is just the worst idea ever. And then they'll just stop it when it actually might not be. So what would you suggest? Is it like talking to a friend?
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, there's a sort of a second technique called a pre-mortem that I mentioned, right? And a pre-mortem is you take any idea and assume it has failed. Right. And so then you become all creative around why has it failed? And your idea is to come up with 100 reasons it's failed.
Wow.
Right? And it's best done with a group, particularly if there's very negative people in your group. Actually, what you're doing, and why it's a great sort of team bonding technique, is you are giving those people who normally you tell to be quiet center stage and saying, do you know what? We want your negative. You are the guru now. Tell us all the reasons. But you also encourage the team, come up, well, I want more. I want more bad reasons why this might fail. So, and the idea being is when you come up with those 100, you identify the 3, 5 that you're most worried about. And then you flip it around and say, okay, how do we make sure those things never happen? Now, if you're on your own, this is what we've done better. You can, like you said, Nicole, go and ask a friend, right?
Yeah.
Tell them, do you know what, Nicole, I want to lose weight. And they'll be like, they'll laugh at you. They'll go, well, you'll never do that because your mum makes such a good food. And you're like, oh, that's one reason that this might fail. Or you'll never do that. You and I both know you've never used a gym membership in the past. And you go, oh, that's the reason it might fail, right?
Yeah.
So your friends actually will, because they know you, will fire out stuff. And if you can't get access to a friend or you want more ideas, fortunately, we're at a time where you could literally put in your idea into ChatGPT and say, give me 10 reasons I might achieve this. What are the 10 most common reasons, right? Give me 100 reasons, right? You're outsourcing the creativity to ChatGPT. So you don't need, and I often do that in teams who don't, I say, do you know what? One of you in the team is going to be using ChatGPT and it's going to be your idea machine. Next time, somebody else is going to use it. It's a great way also of getting a team comfortable using AI because particularly as I work with senior audiences who have heard the term AI, but don't use it day in, day out.
Yeah. Oh, this is so great. That's awesome, Faris. Okay, so let's move on to EQ then. So this is where we are now, you're trying to get everyone on board. You're trying to get people to rally around the idea.
Yeah.
And so how do we get people on board with ideas, especially if, let's say they say it and not everyone's gung-ho about it from the get-go?
Okay. So one of the biggest things is engagement. All right. Too many leaders dictate onto their teams or others rather than engage them. All right.
Yeah.
And the story I often tell around this is the iPads in the original Apple stores. Right. What Apple used to do in their original stores was they would put the iPads on the wall and they would purposely turn them 10 degrees askew. Okay. The reason being is when a human being walks in and sees an iPad askew, what do most human beings do?
They want to change, like fix
Well,
it.
fix it. It's like seeing a picture, right? You reach out and you think it. And as soon as you touch the iPad, you're twice as likely to buy it.
Really?
Because you've got a physical connection to it. And this is what I tell leaders is too many of you are putting strategies or ideas that are straight. You're not allowing your team to reach out and straighten it. And therefore they feel like they own it. Or they're likely, right? So what's the number one way to get engagement? All right. Have you heard of the platinum rule?
No.
Have you heard of the golden rule? You might have been told the golden rule as a child, which started treat others
as you want to be treated.
As you want to be treated. That's called the golden rule. There is a better version of the rule.
What's
if
that?
you think about it, it makes absolute sense. It goes, treat others how they want to be treated. Right?
Yeah.
Not how you want to be treated, because what if they have slightly different values, slightly different beliefs?
Yeah.
The only way you can do that is to find out what they like.
Right.
And the classic example is think how many times, look at your email inbox.
Yeah.
Bet you half your emails start with, hi, Nicole, how are you? Whereas the other half start, Nicole, I need this from you. Right?
Not even a Nicole.
Right?
Not even a hello.
Nicole, right?
Yeah, so rude. Yeah.
And you have your own personal preference. You're probably in your head, I always like starting with a how are you, right? And so therefore I'm going to put it on every email. But do you know what? To be super effective and super EQ, if I know the person I'm sending it to doesn't like doing that, then I need to adapt to what they like, not my golden rule, but their platinum rule.
Interesting.
Right? And so the number one thing we work with leaders is to flex to what the other person needs in how you communicate to them, how frequently you communicate, how you engage, right? And obviously alongside that, they need to improve their listening. They need to improve their flexing of their own style, right? All these things, but ultimately it's about engaging rather than telling.
Interesting. Okay. But what happens if, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Okay.
Good.
What happens if you have a culture which tries to foster certain values and you have employees or leaders who go against those values, the culture, and therefore are, let's say their communication style is very different to what the values are. So for example, the idea that came into my head was Gary V. Do you know Gary V?
I know Gary V. I mean, I don't know him personally, but
I don't know him either. Not yet, but maybe one day. Anyway, so his whole thing is about being kind and being an empath, but also being successful. And that I assume is filtered throughout his companies, given that is his whole ethos. Now, if I assume that someone is like rude and or yells or aggressive, those values may not align with the culture of Gary V's companies. So my question is, in that situation, appreciate that, like, it's kind of hard. Like, I guess, how do you like still maintain your own values while flexing to someone else's in order to like meet this platinum rule?
And I get asked this question, a lot of different variations of this question. And what you're basically doing with me is wargaming, right? I've given you an idea and you're taking it to the stream and say, what if you get this? And I said, and I'll tell people, and somebody once asked me, so if I have an employee who is massively racist, are you saying I need to flex and be racist? And, because that's what they like. And I said, of course not, right? Do not step outside the values of your company or your thing, right? Right. But, and you need to deal with that, right? And it's the same if you've got a toxic person in your team. What I go in and work with leaders is up to a point of getting people engaged. But if you've got a really bad apple, then you probably need to get rid of that apple. Right. And that's a different conversation, how you do it, why you do it and all this. But what I'm saying is, if you're faced with that racist, instead of saying you're wrong, right, this is my view, say, why do you think that? Help me out. Even the most polar opposite person who's against your cultures, against your values, you can engage them by listening, by using those skills of listening. Help me understand, right? Now, it doesn't change your values. It doesn't make you a racist by engaging with them. if you're lucky, you might bring them closer to your camp. Or you might reinforce this person is that bad apple and I need to get rid of them. But what I'm saying, the worst thing you can do is saying you're wrong. This is the value here, right? It is engage, listen. You'll be amazed at how far you can bring a person with you.
Interesting. And do you think that the platinum rule should also be used by junior lawyers or junior, like I'm talking about lawyers because I'm a lawyer, but like junior employees, if you will?
Yeah, it should be used by everyone. It should be taught, right? How, particularly if you're managing upwards, right? I often tell the story of when I was a junior consultant, one of the senior guys, and one of the hardest things, and I'm sure it's in law, is your actual client is the partner, right? Is the person internally, not the, and they're the hardest person to please because they have very high standards and it's very clear. So I was working on this project, a new senior, a new partner that I was working with. He walked in day one and he said to us all, there was a team of 4, he said, I've just emailed you all my style guide. Right? So we all looked at our inbox. It was 14 pages on how he liked slides, how he liked PowerPoint slides.
Okay.
I was like, what an arrogant person to email us this. But do you know what? He literally gave us his platinum rules.
Sure.
Like, if you can do this, I'll be a happy person. You won't have a late night.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, I wish everybody could do that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a junior, try and find out somebody's platinum rules, their style guide, their, I like emails in the morning. I like to be spoken. I like this style of communication. Your life will be so much easier, but even better, they will think they have been the genius, right? You can transfer ideas and they'll think it's their ideas. And So, but a lot of people just ignore that or don't go curious to find that out and just try, take a punt and say, I'm going to try this.
Right. Yeah. That's really good advice. And actually it'll probably make them even more emotionally intelligent themselves because they'll be able to actually start developing that muscle and say, okay, with this person, they like it this way, this person likes it that way, etc. So yeah, love that. Now, in terms of personal goals, if like you mentioned this woman, the young woman who is climbing these mountains, you said that she got her family on board. But what happens like if that is a goal and the family is like, no way, like you got to finish school, like they're just not on board. Then what happens? How do you proceed if you don't have the closest people that need to support you on board?
Yes. And this young lady is very lucky because her father was an explorer. So he actually got her into it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's the old saying of no person is an island, right? If you were to discover that they were, then you've got to really go back to your vision and say, how important is this to me that I'm willing to do it against? Because that's going to add like 100% difficulty. Because not only am I focusing on trying to achieve this goal, I'm going to have to expend a whole amount of energy and processing to deal with all this criticism along the way.
Yeah.
Now you might still come to the conclusion it is so vital for me, right? So then it's partly neutralizing that sort of criticism, right? And it might be conversations, mum, dad, family. I know you disagree with me on this. Right? I need to do this. So therefore, let's find a way of working together. And it might be at family dinners, we don't talk about this, right? I always talk about teams agreeing on ways of working. And that applies to families and romantic relationships. We all do it, but I think very few people actually write it down, but I'm saying make those agreements of, look, hey, do you know what, when we're together, I know you, because it'll just be too tiring every time I see you to be like, oh, I know you disapprove of this, you disapprove of that. And then similarly at the same time, find those who can support you in your goal, right?
Yeah.
If you're eliminating a group that would be providing that foundational strength, then who can replace them?
Yeah. That is really good advice. So neutralize the criticism and judgment, communicate, maybe set some boundaries, and then find others who can support.
Yes.
Yeah. Love that. That's awesome. All right. Now the final leg of the FQ. So the FQ now.
Yes.
So yeah. So like how, again, practically, how are we implementing this?
Yeah. So practically the number one thing we can all do is prioritization, right? Right? Look at all the things you're trying to achieve, remove, right? Don't do 10 things mediocre, do 3 things really well. Do one thing. right? So how do we practically help companies? Every time I walk into a company, I will find they are doing 100 strategic projects, right? On top of business as usual. They're launching a new product, they're entering a new country, they're doing an HR overview or whatever. And I'm like, hang on a minute, that's way too much, right? How can anyone in your company know what they should be focusing on?
Mm-hmm.
You're telling them all these 100 things are important at the same time. It can't be, right?
Yeah.
So we need to get those 100 down to 10.
Right.
You need to get them down to 5 even. So that's the number one thing. And you do it in your own personal life, right? Don't try and get married while learning a language, while moving house, right? Try and rationalize, try and prioritize.
Yeah. Cool. That's great. I love this. This is a really great formula that I think can be applied to so many areas of everyone's life. And I think this has really been such a great deep dive. Now, before we move on to the final segment of the podcast, what do you think, in your experience, you've been doing this for so many years now, what is the biggest challenge that you see people face whenever they're trying to meet a goal? Like, does it normally fall into the IQ, EQ, or FQ, stance?
Again, it depends on the person. If you're very, let's say you're a very technical person, you're an engineer, then often you've got very high IQ. And I work with a lot of these kind of people, or super smart lawyers. They know all the law. They're lacking in the EQ part, like, communicating, and so we often help them there. Or you get the reverse. You get someone who is super focused, right? They're a really good. You give them a checklist, they will deliver it. They'll deliver it, right? But you ask them to come up with 10 new ideas. They're like, So everyone has their own personal challenge. But if I look across the work I've done, not just in the last 5 years of Shiageto, but in the 20 years, the area, probably the biggest gap consistently is the EQ bucket. And then the FQ bucket. Maybe it's the circles I work in, but there's more than enough IQ in companies. That's why I stopped focusing on that. I stopped being an expert in stuff, aside from getting teams working better together and getting people sharper. Because I was like, do you know what? The legal world has got that covered. The engineering world's got that covered.
Right.
The world's got that covered, but they don't have that EQ skills. And that's where I'm going to lean in.
That's awesome. And do you think that people have, I assume you do, but it's a skill that can be developed if it's not already there?
It's a skill that can be developed. But it's like any other skill, any other muscle. If you've never worked it, you need to get practice in. All right. And I can tell you loads of things that I didn't realize at the time, but was hours of practice that got me to where I am today, partly in the classroom, like trying to get 10, 11-year-olds to engage with a subject that they all hated.
Yeah.
That was a lot of iterating, a lot of managing my own emotions, finding different ways to do the platinum rule with them, get through to them, win them round, convince them. Right. I had to the point that then when I was in the consulting world, I had a boss who used to make me prepare the same presentation 4 times in 4 different styles. And he said to me, "You'll hate me, but you will be better because you don't know, you're about to walk into a room with a new client you've not met. Do they like a logical argument? Do they like a direct argument? Do they like a story? So to teach you how to flex instantly, I'm going to make you stay here and prepare 4 versions because in the future, you'll be able to do it like that without even thinking."
Thank you. I appreciate that. This has been awesome.
My pleasure.
So now we're going to move on to the final episode of the final segment of the podcast. And it's called the EnvisionAir Questionnaire. And it is a fun feature of the podcast where we ask guests to reflect on their past and their present, as well as their future. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yes. All right. So reflecting on your past, if you could give your 15-year-old self, 15-year-old Faris, any advice, what would it be?
I think 15, I would be like, don't worry, buddy. You've got some exciting times ahead of you. And I say that because even at 15, I was very shy and awkward, and I felt like I didn't fit in. And, at that sort of age, a lot of these things weigh heavy on your mind. I see it in a lot of the teenagers who I work with. And so it's the ability to be a bit more head up and look, when you're 15, you think you're if it's a sporting match, you imagine it's the last 5 minutes of the match and you haven't won. But actually, you're only in the first 5 minutes of the match. And it's hard for you to realize that. So it's that kind of awareness that there's still a long way to play, and the odds are in your favor.
100%. I love that advice. That is so good. Yeah. I think I was actually telling another guest recently that there's only been 2 people who've been guests who've come on the podcast and who've said like, oh, my 15-year-old self was like the coolest person ever. And I was like, really? I was like, mine was so not. She was so scared and shy and nervous. Anyway, so yeah, it's definitely but good advice. And reflecting on your present, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world tonight,
yes,
who would it be and what question would you ask them?
I mean, it's that they have to be alive now.
No, it could be someone who's passed. Yeah, anyone.
Do you know what I would want to talk to someone like, well, I'm forever quoting like Maya Angelou.
Oh, that's such a great choice.
Yeah, and I'd love to just meet her because I quote her so much. But also, I bet her life wasn't easy. But what we remember of her was, such positive quotes. And so how does she maintain that positivity against her backdrop? And it's the same for, Rosetta Parks or anyone who faced discrimination, but we remember them so positively. Nelson Mandela, but yeah, Maya Angelou comes to mind initially.
Amazing. I love that. Speaking of Nelson Mandela, I actually heard recently something, I think it was Tony Robbins had asked Nelson Mandela the question, like, how did you even like deal with being in prison? Like, how did your mindset, like, weren't you so angry at what had happened? And what he said, which was so, because you just mentioned him, he said that, no, it was actually preparing him for the future, because he had that already in his mind. He already knew that, even though it was such a difficult situation, he didn't see it as a difficult situation. He saw it as preparing him and the country for whatever is to come. Either he would pass away in jail and then it would start a civil war, like a revolution, or it was preparing him to be the leader when he came out. So I just thought that was so incredible. And and Maya Angelou, another, like, because I've seen so many interviews with her and Oprah, and I mean, it feels like in her mind, she does not even engage with the negative. And I've actually heard her say things like, whenever she had dinner parties, and if someone ever said anything negative, either racist, prejudiced, whatever, discriminate, the party would stop and the person would be called out to leave the party, because she did not even want that sort of energy around. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm assuming that would be part of her answer, but it's a really good choice. And so anyway,
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. And looking towards your future, what is one goal you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I'm the kind of person who does plan in 5-year cycles, so I could answer this in depth.
Go for it.
Dimensions that I've divided my life into. But you know what? The most important goal is relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is strengthen the relationships I already have,
mm-hmm.
and form at least one new relationship that will be with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. That is a beautiful goal. Well, you're going to have to keep us posted on that one. We'll be following along.
There you go.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So
always leave something for people to come back for. That's what my dad always used to teach me.
I love that's good advice. Definitely. Thank you so much, Faris, for being on the EnvisionAir podcast. You have been a great guest with so much advice, and I love the formula IQ, EQ, FQ. So thank you again. And if people want to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Oh, well, I love it if they connect with me, and I always suggest 2 ways. One, come and visit the company website. The company's called Shiageto, which is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone, and we'll put the spelling in. You'll read the story of why I called it that on the website. And the other way is come and find me on LinkedIn. I spend too much time on LinkedIn, engaging with people, sharing stuff. There's only one Faris Aranki I've discovered on LinkedIn. So come and find me. I will reply to your message, or reply to every message, and we'll carry on the conversation.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, thank you so much, Faris. And To the Envisionaires, thank you so much for listening. And remember to stay curious, stay open, and keep envisioning your best lives filled with unlimited possibilities. Sending you all lots of love. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.